Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I initially was going to talk about a GLC event, which I might do at the end of the video, but honestly, I think this video really needs to be just a discussion about the GLC format and the state that it's in currently, because truth be told, GLC is not in a very good state at all. And if you're a fan of GLC, you'll be aware of this, and if you're not so familiar with GLC or you're not sure what's going on with it, then consider this kind of like a update slash news vid. So basically, webcam tournaments are currently the only way to play GLC online, because Pokemon TCG Live did not get their act together, and despite forcing us onto Pokemon TCG Live, with the new set, basically saying you can only play Scarlet and Violet if you migrate your account, even though Pokemon TCG Live was not in a fit state for this, because it doesn't even have a full expanded format. There's a ton of glitches and bugs, all that kind of caper that we're all very familiar with at this point. But basically, there is no complete expanded format on TCG Live to begin with, so you can't even use XY cards in expanded or black and white cards. And even though you can still use the Sun and Moon cards, you can't even challenge your friends in matches. So it's kind of like just adding salt to the wound at that point, but it basically means there is literally no way to play GLC currently on Pokemon TCG Live. However, there is a GLC tournament that I'm going to talk about at some point in this video that is actually GLC standard, and it's taking place pretty soon actually. Depending on when this video goes up or not will depend if you can enter in that event, but I will go over that at some point in today's video. However, currently the state of GLC is pretty grim, and unfortunately, this is part in due to the fact that the format is an alternate format, so not a lot of people play it or are very familiar with it. And it also means that because less people play it or less people are familiar with it, it means that the same players end up, prioritizing it and taking up the most of the player base. And it means the format becomes very refined and very competitive very quickly. So effectively, is what happened with GLC is over the last year or so, the format has become fairly narrow in terms of the best types and sort of like the best 60 cards you can play for each deck. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily a very negative thing, especially not for the players who are, of course, winning with those decks and are doing very well. Of course, congrats to them. And I would like to say that with every new set that has been added since then, since GLC was first created in lockdown, it is safe to say that there is new archetypes and new upgrades for different decks constantly being released. Scarlet and Violet added so much. Think of like Annihilate as an amazing attacker and fighting decks. Even the Crocodile is as well for the Earthquake. You've got Reverum, which is arguably, I don't think it's arguably, I think it is like one of the only ways to draw cards in metal type decks. And, Defiant Band is an amazing new tool card that you have to time well because obviously it's only a one-of in a deck. So, there's been some amazing new additions, and Paldea Evolved only seems to be getting better for GLC because Reversal Energy will be huge, of course. So there's all these like positives, but at the same time, GLC has become very like centralized on certain decks. And the deck that came first is a deck that I see so often in GLC events, and you'll probably see this in every tournament that you enter for GLC, and that is this expanded Porygon Z kind of toolbox deck. So essentially, colorless types have the uncanny ability to run whatever special energy they want in terms of colorless energy because they're not focused on any one typing. So this allows them to play a bunch of like really busted energy, like double colorless, for example, which is probably like the best energy aside from twin energy in GLC, arguably. I guess counter energy or double dragon could be better if you really wanted to make a case for that, but you still have access to other energy which is really busted, like capture energy, as well as, powerful colorless energy, weakness guard energy, and you can all attach all of these busted energies using Porygon Z, so very powerful. And colorless types also has access to both B-Barrel and Cinccino. Not every type has, multiple draw engines to take advantage of. Colorless types happen too. So yeah, bit of a weird way of saying things, but it basically means that colorless is a very strong archetype. There's a couple of other archetypes that do well. Water has been like in and out of the format, Ever since Kyogre got beated, basically, water types have had it a little bit more rough than usual, but evident by these results, it's safe to say that water is still doing decently well. Darkness and grass are also strong hitters. Usually fighting is like the worst type, I would say, in GLC typically. There's like fairy control decks, so fairy's not actually the worst. I'm not sure what the state of dragon is because I still think all the busted dragons are still legal, so that's something to bear in mind if you're like a dragon fan, I guess. But essentially, the state of GLC right now is that we can't play it on TCG Live, and the only way to play it is through webcams. And most of us are not familiar with webcams or don't like using them for fairly obvious reasons. I personally don't like using them. I'd rather just play IRL at that point. And it's really frustrating because I don't hate this format. I just really wish it was more accessible. And I think Pokemon TCG Live could really help with that if they just got their act together, fixed the bugs and added the expanded format in its full. Because, we look at TCG Live compared to TCGO for deck building. In TCGO, you had to trade or pull all the pieces that you needed for GLC decks. And that meant that annoying one-offs in Expanded that were only really playable in GLC became really annoying and niche to trade for because players had this like weird attitude where they'd be like, oh yeah, this card sees a ton of success in GLC, therefore it's worth like 10 plus packs. Just really annoying, quite frankly, shark behavior, to be honest. And it's just like, well, TCG Live, you just craft anything. Like, you want something, you craft it. So it's really dependent on just how many credits you have. So I really like that aspect about TCG Live, but of course you can't really, but there's no point actually right now in crafting anything from XY, even if you really wanted to, because why would you? You can't use any of the cards currently. So there is this like massive downside with just the state of everything, and we just need Pokemon TCG Live developers to get their act together basically, and then we'll eventually get the expanded format added, hopefully, and then we'll get matchmaking added, hopefully, and we will be able to do GLC tournaments again. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't really fix any of the other problems the format might have, like the best decks being the same decks they've always been. There is this element of the refined 60 where basically everyone feels cornered into playing the most optimal build of GLC. And I think part of that problem does stem from the fact that so few people play in this format, especially now because it's limited to webcam and just IRL. I feel if we saw more players in GLC, we would see a lot more deck variety. I can't verify that with data. It's obviously not possible right now, but it's just a feeling that I have that's, it's just like if we had more players, surely we would see more variety and creativity. Because typically, like if you look in standard events, usually, yeah, the top decks are all the same. It's the same decks winning the events, typically, same top 8 kind of stuff. But if you go further back into the event, top 32, top 64, you start to see more interesting decks and people generally cooking up more spice. Now, that's not saying this format is better or worse for having more or less players in it. I just think there'd be more creativity in general if there was more people playing it. But unfortunately, we don't have that to go off right now, and we might not have that for a while. So it's difficult to say, would that ever actually make a true difference? Or is GLC destined to remain in this kind of like competitive cycle where it gets buffs every set, but decks like this Porygon Z Colors box are always ruling supreme, and there's always like, why would you play any other Colors Pokemon when these are clearly the best in the format? So, it kind of like, I feel this is kind of like going off topic, but I feel like when Andrew Mahone created GLC, or whenever he used to talk about it a lot, what he would say was, the format is great because you get new upgrades for your deck every set and you can improve it and stuff. And I often interpreted that as him thinking about like the casual side of GLC that you don't really see much of anymore because, he was saying basically anyone can play GLC and you can hopefully use any Pokemon. And this format is a lot better when it's taken less seriously and when it's more casual. And I feel that's what GLC was designed for, especially when, standard was hellish as it was in lockdown stuff. But now it's kind of just gotten more and more competitive, not in short thanks to the fact that so few people play the event and play the format, I should say, but it is a bit of a shame, and I do kind of wish it was more casual in a way, but I don't know how you can improve on it, basically, because when you're only allowed one copy of a card and deck space is finite, there's always going to be, stuff like staples. So teammates will never not be included in every deck. Cards like Trainer's Mail, Via Seeker, and Guzma, Tile Map. These are all cards that feel destined to permanently be staples in this format. So I'm not sure what you could do to really ever change that. There's also like this whole issue with tool cards with, the correct Pokemon, like what Pokemon do you play for each typing? Is there going to be much creativity beyond that? And I want to also say that this video might come across as a bit negative, and I could see people pointing at this video compared to some other videos where I talk about my own formats and other people's formats. And people might think this is me kind of like pushing down GLC to boost up my own stuff. That shouldn't be interpreted in that way, because I want this format to succeed. I want this format to be in the centerfold. For like the longest time, I really wanted this to be an optional game mode on Pokemon TCG Live. But seeing more and more of these events leaves me less optimal. Oh, and not really less optimal, I'm just like fumbling words at this point. But like less optimistic. That's the one I want. Less optimistic that this format could be really good in a casual setting, because I've talked about before that I think TCG Live just really needs a more casual format. It really doesn't have one right now. The casual standard is just a mess. It's a mix between people actually trying out rogue casual decks and people just farming wins off other players with, max rarity Lugia or whatever. So, like ranked or casual, I should say, expanded casual, it's just all the same in all honesty. So yeah, I think Live needs a more casual format. Is GLC the answer? I don't know at this point. I really don't. It doesn't feel nearly as casual as Theme, although in some aspects I still wish we had GLC, and I think it'd be really cool if it was, implemented at some point, or at the very least they fixed, expanded, and we are able to do Pokemon TCG Live GLC tournaments. But all that aside, what is the event that I alluded to earlier? Well, basically, the Discord Power Weekly, which were the host of that single prize Scarlet and Violet only event. So these guys are responsible for some very cool tournaments. Basically, they say our tradition of wacky deck building lives on in this tournament. This will be a GLC event held with cards in standard rotation. And of course, huge shout out to our code sponsor, Snake Eyes Gaming. So effectively, this is GLC, but standard only. So a greatly reduced card pool. But this event will be very interesting, to be honest. It'll be very cool to see what players have to use, because, of course, stuff like Porygon, stuff like expanded mill decks like Moltres can't exist in this format. So players will, of course, have to be really creative. Maybe if we see enough variety in this event, we will see more GLC standard events on TCG Live. Hopefully. Even if it's not like a permanent thing, it's just like a temporary solution until we get expanded back. But honestly, I think it'd be really cool. Maybe 2 versions of GLC is just way too much for how small this format is right now. But I do think it's a really cool idea. And, I'm down for seeing these results, basically. And also just like more of stuff from this format in general. Like, I want to see more unique events, more single prize events, more GLC stuff. So, yeah, should be pretty cool. But yeah, it's been Ember Power. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think about GLC and the state it's in down below. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.